At the end of the workday, my CEO asked me, "Can you keep a secret?" I froze halfway through packing my laptop. She never spoke to me directly, let alone asked something like that. Yes, I said, though my voice came out more like a question. She smiled, though it didn't reach her eyes. Good. Follow me. I worked in a tall glass building downtown that you could see right into every floor. But the place my CEO led me wasn't on any of them. She pressed her thumb against a small black panel near the back elevators. The doors slid open with a soft hiss, revealing a narrow hallway lined with metal walls. "I need your help tonight," she said as we walked. "Something confidential. You're smart, quiet, and you stay late. That's exactly the kind of person I need." I was just a secretary, not anyone important. But curiosity got the best of me. The hallway led to an unmarked door. Inside was a windowless office filled with old filing cabinets and computer servers. A single monitor glowed on a desk. On the screen was a map of our city, but layered with strange red dots and paths. "I need you to deliver something," she said, pulling a small silver case from her briefcase that was about the size of a lunchbox. "Don't open it. Don't lose it. You'll meet someone at the harbor in an hour. Give it to them and walk away." "Who am I meeting?" I asked. She looked at me for a long moment. "Someone who's been waiting a very long time." That didn't make sense, but then again, none of this did. She handed me a black company car key and the case. "If anyone follows you," she added quietly, "drive to Pier 7 and get out fast. Don't stop for anyone." I wanted to ask more, but she was already walking away. I drove with both hands tight on the wheel, the silver case strapped into the passenger seat like a person. Every red light felt longer than usual. Halfway there, I noticed headlights behind me. They'd been there for miles, same distance away from me the whole time. I took an early turn, then another, then sped up. The headlights matched me. My CEO's words echoed in my head. "If anyone follows you, drive to Pier 7. I did. Tires screeched against wet pavement as I pulled into the empty dockyard. The car behind me stopped too. Two men stepped out. They weren't police, that was very clear. I grabbed the case and ran. I heard one of them shout, "Stop." No chance. I ducked behind a stack of shipping crates, heart racing, fog curling around me like smoke. The men's footsteps echoed closer. My breath came fast and loud in my ears. Then I saw a flicker of light ahead. Someone holding a lantern, waving once. That had to be my contact. I sprinted toward it, clutching the case. When I reached the edge of the dock, the figure stepped forward, an older woman wearing a long gray coat and gloves. "You're late," she said, voice low. "Someone followed me." I gasped, thrusting the case toward her. "Take it!" But she didn't. She looked at me strangely. "Did she tell you what's inside?" "No, I was told not to ask." The woman smiled sadly. Of course she didn't. She opened the case herself. Inside wasn't money or documents. It was a small thumb drive the size of a marble that had a small blinking light in the center. "What is that?" I whispered. Before she could answer, the men's voices echoed closer. "There! By the water." The woman turned to me sharply. "You need to know the truth before they destroy it." She held up the thumb drive. "This is the only remaining copy of a dark web list of elite hackers. Your company enlisted them years ago with the intention of exposing shady businesses. But when they started questioning orders, it was shut down. I was one of the recruiters who helped build the list. Your CEO wants it back so she can destroy it for good." "Destroy it? Why?" "She's afraid. They learned too much." The footsteps were nearly upon us now. I looked between the woman, the case, and the shadows approaching through the fog. My hands shook. "What do I do?" I asked. "Choose," she said simply. "Give it to me or give it back to her." Then she ran toward the edge of the pier, climbing down onto a small boat. "Pier 8, she called. "I'll be there till midnight." I stood frozen. The men appeared, shouting, guns drawn. "Drop it!" I didn't think about it one bit before I tossed the case into the water. It sank beneath the surface and vanished into the dark. The men cursed and ran past me, searching the waves. I turned and slipped into the fog before they noticed I was gone. Later that night, I checked the news. A small fishing boat had gone missing near Pier 8. No survivors were found. The next morning, I walked into the office like nothing had happened. My CEO was already there, standing by the window. "Did you deliver it?" she asked, her tone calm but sharp. I met her eyes. "Yes." She studied me for a long moment. "Good." Then she turned back to the skyline. "Some things are better forgotten." Relieved, I sat down to get started on my workday. Yet, when I opened my laptop, the monitor flickered a few times before the same sentence appeared on the screen, repeating over and over. "Thank you for setting us free." I looked back to the CEO standing over my desk. Her eyes locked onto mine and I felt my stomach twist. She asked if there were any problems with the delivery last night. I shook my head and told her no. Everything went smoothly, though my voice came out quieter than I wanted. She studied my face for what felt like forever, before nodding slowly and walking back toward her office. I waited until she turned the corner before I closed my laptop with shaking hands. The screen went dark, and I sat there frozen, staring at the black surface. 20 minutes passed while I just sat there, afraid to open it again. When I finally lifted the lid, The screen showed my normal desktop with email and spreadsheets. The message was completely gone. I checked the browser history and system logs but found nothing. Someone had access to my computer and could make things appear and disappear without leaving any trace. That terrified me more than anything else because it meant they were watching me right now. I grabbed my purse and left for lunch even though I wasn't hungry. The elevator ride down felt too slow, and I kept glancing at the security cameras in the corners. Outside, the sidewalk was crowded with people heading to restaurants and food trucks. I started walking, no destination in mind, just moving. I circled the block once, then again, trying to make sense of what was happening. The message had said, "Thank you for setting us free." Setting who free? The woman at the pier told me the thumb drive contained a list of hackers the company had recruited. I threw it in the water to keep those men from getting it. But what if destroying it somehow released the information instead? What if there was some kind of backup system that activated when the drive got wet? I walked faster, weaving between people on the sidewalk. My mind kept spinning through possibilities, but none of them made complete sense. The hackers were supposed to expose corrupt businesses, but then they started questioning orders. The CEO wanted the list destroyed so they couldn't be tracked down, except now they were thanking me for freeing them. I completed my 5th lap around the block before heading back inside. When I stepped off the elevator, I saw something on my keyboard immediately. A plain manila envelope sat there. No writing on the outside. No return address or stamps. I looked around, but everyone else was at lunch or focused on their screens. I picked it up carefully and opened the flap. Inside was a single newspaper clipping, yellowed at the edges like it was old. The headline read, "Local woman reported missing," and below it was a photo of the woman from the pier. Leilani Khoury, age 54, was last seen 3 years ago near the Harbor District. The article said police suspected foul play, but no body was ever recovered. I read it 3 times, my hands starting to shake worse than before. 3 years ago. Not last night like the news report claimed. I pulled out my phone and searched for the missing boat story from last night. It was still there on the local news website, complete with Coast Guard quotes and witness statements. But this clipping showed Leilani disappeared years before I ever met her at that pier. Someone had planted a fake news story to make me think she died because of what I did. They wanted me to believe I caused her death by throwing that case in the water. But why go through all that trouble? Why make me think I killed someone? I sat down hard in my chair, the clipping still in my hand. The whole thing at the pier must have been staged, from the chase to the choice she gave me. They needed me to throw the case in the water at that specific spot. The CEO, the 2 men, even Leilani were all working together to manipulate me into doing exactly what I did. But if they were all on the same side, why did the message thank me for setting the hackers free? Nothing about this made any sense, and my head was starting to hurt from trying to figure it out. Someone cleared their throat nearby and I jumped, shoving the clipping into my desk drawer. Axel from accounting stood there holding a folder, looking concerned. He mentioned he saw me leaving with the CEO 2 nights ago from the parking garage. He asked if everything was okay because I looked really stressed today. I forced a smile and told him it was just a headache, nothing serious. He didn't look convinced but nodded anyway. He said if I ever needed someone to talk to, his desk was just down the hall. The way he said it felt genuine, not like he was fishing for gossip. I thanked him and he walked away. After he left, I thought about what he said. He noticed me leaving with the CEO, which meant he pays attention to things around the office. He might actually be someone I could trust if things got worse. I made a mental note to remember that. The rest of the afternoon dragged by. I kept checking my laptop screen for more messages, but nothing appeared. Every time someone walked past my desk, I tensed up. By 5 o'clock, I practically ran to my car. The drive home took forever because of traffic, and I kept checking my mirrors for cars that might be following me. My apartment building looked normal when I pulled into the parking lot. I took the stairs instead of the elevator and checked the hallway before unlocking my door. Inside, everything looked exactly how I left it that morning. I locked the door behind me and put the chain on. Then I started searching. I pulled books off shelves and checked behind picture frames. I looked under furniture and inside lampshades. I unscrewed electrical outlet covers and examined air vents. I went through every room twice, looking for cameras or listening devices or anything that didn't belong. After 2 hours, I found nothing. My apartment was clean. But that didn't make me feel better because whoever sent that message clearly had access to my work computer. If they could get into that, they probably had other ways of watching me. I ordered food delivery because I was too paranoid to go back outside. While I waited for it to arrive, I sat on my couch staring at my phone. Should I call the police? And tell them what exactly? That my CEO sent me on a mysterious delivery mission and now I'm getting weird messages? They'd think I was crazy. Plus, the CEO had warned me to keep everything confidential or face legal consequences. I ate my food without tasting it and tried to watch TV but couldn't focus. At 11 p.m., I was getting ready for bed when my phone buzzed with an email notification. I picked it up and saw a message from an address that was just random letters and numbers. The subject line was blank. I opened it and there were only 2 lines. A phone number and the words, "Call me if you want the truth about what you destroyed." I stared at those words for a full minute. This had to be from whoever sent the laptop message. They knew what happened at the pier. They knew I threw the case in the water. I sat on the edge of my bed holding my phone, trying to decide what to do. An hour passed while I just sat there. Finally, I stood up and dialed the number before I could change my mind. It rang twice before someone picked up. A woman's voice answered, younger than Leilani, maybe in her 30s. She asked if this was me, and I said yes. She told me the thumb drive wasn't the only copy of the hacker list. Her voice was calm and matter-of-fact, like she was explaining something simple. She said there were backups in multiple locations. When I threw the case in the water at that specific pier, the drive had a transmitter inside that activated when it got wet. That signal triggered what she called a dead man's switch. The backup files automatically sent the complete hacker list to all the hackers themselves, along with information about the CEO's plans to eliminate them. My action of destroying the drive actually released all the information to the very people the CEO wanted to keep it from. I asked who she was and why she was telling me this. She paused for a second before answering. Her name was Ria, and she used to work at my company. She helped build the original hacker network years ago, back when the CEO first started recruiting them. The hackers were brought in to expose corporate corruption and illegal business practices. They were good at their jobs, really good. But then they started finding problems with our own company. They discovered things the CEO didn't want exposed. She explained that when the hackers began questioning their orders and asking uncomfortable questions, the CEO decided to shut the whole program down. But shutting it down wasn't enough because the hackers knew too much. The CEO needed to destroy the list so they couldn't be tracked and eliminated one by one. Ria said she was forced out of the company 3 years ago when she tried to warn the hackers about what was coming. She'd been trying to stop the CEO ever since, but couldn't get access to the list until I accidentally triggered the dead man's switch at the pier. Now all the hackers knew they were in danger and had the evidence they needed to protect themselves. She stared at my screen for a second longer before walking back to her office without another word. The message had already disappeared by the time she looked. I closed my laptop fast and kept my hands flat on my desk to stop them from shaking. The rest of the day dragged on while I pretended to work on spreadsheets and emails. Every time someone walked past my cubicle, my whole body went tight. I kept thinking about that message and what it meant. Someone had access to my computer and they knew exactly what happened at the pier. They knew I threw the case in the water. Around 3 o'clock, I packed up my things and left early, telling my supervisor I felt sick. Nobody questioned it. I drove home taking random turns and checking my mirrors the whole way. My apartment felt different when I walked in, like someone had been there even though nothing looked moved. I checked every room twice, looking behind doors and in closets. Nothing. I made dinner but couldn't eat it. I sat on my couch staring at my phone for hours, jumping every time a car drove past outside. At 11, the email notification made me drop my phone. The sender was just random letters and numbers. The subject line was blank. Inside were 2 lines. A phone number and the words "call me if you want the truth about what you destroyed." I read it 5 times. This had to be from whoever sent the laptop message. They knew what happened. They knew I threw the case in the water. My hands were sweating when I picked up my phone again. An hour went by while I just sat there holding it. Finally, I stood up and dialed before I could change my mind. It rang twice. A woman answered, younger than Leilani, maybe 30s. She asked if this was me, and I said yes. She started talking right away in this calm voice like she was just explaining something normal. The thumb drive wasn't the only copy of the hacker list. There were backups in different places. When I threw the case in the water at that exact pier, the drive had something inside it that turned on when it got wet. That signal did something she called a dead man's switch. The backup files automatically sent the complete hacker list to all the hackers, along with information about the CEO's plans to get rid of them. My action of destroying the drive actually released all the information to the very people the CEO wanted to keep it from. I asked who she was. She paused before answering. Her name was Ria, and she used to work at my company. She helped build the original hacker network years back when the CEO first started getting them together. The hackers were brought in to find bad stuff companies were doing, illegal things. They were really good at it, but then they started finding problems with our own company. They found things the CEO didn't want anyone to know about. She kept talking, and I just listened. When the hackers began asking questions the CEO didn't like, she decided to shut the whole thing down. But that wasn't enough because the hackers knew too much. The CEO needed to destroy the list so they couldn't be found and dealt with one by one. Ria said she got forced out 3 years ago when she tried to warn the hackers about what was coming. She'd been trying to stop the CEO since then, but couldn't get to the list until I accidentally triggered that switch at the pier. Now all the hackers knew they were in danger and had proof they needed to keep themselves safe. I asked what she meant by proof. Ria explained the CEO had been using the company as a front, money laundering, she called it, and corporate spying, for years. The hackers found out and said they would tell everyone, so the CEO decided to get rid of them by destroying the list and cutting off their protection and money and everything. My stomach felt sick. Ria's voice got more serious. She said I was in danger now. The CEO would figure out eventually that the list wasn't actually destroyed. The hackers were happy with me, but the CEO would think I either messed up or betrayed her. Neither one was safe. She told me to be careful and hung up. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, thinking about money laundering and corporate spying and how I'd been working there for 2 years without knowing any of it. The next morning, I got ready for work, moving like a robot. My hands shook while I made coffee. The drive downtown felt like it took forever. I parked in the garage and rode the elevator up with my heart beating so hard I thought people could hear it. When I got to my desk, I sat down and tried to look normal. Every single time someone walked past, I jumped. My supervisor came by and I nearly knocked over my coffee. A guy from accounting stopped to ask about some paperwork, and I could barely form words. The CEO was in meetings all day, according to her assistant. That gave me time to think, but I couldn't focus on actual work. I opened the same email 3 times without reading it. I started a report and typed 2 sentences in an hour. My brain kept going back to what Ria said. Money laundering, corporate spying. The CEO wanted to eliminate people. Around 10:30, Camilla from IT showed up at my desk with her laptop. She said she needed to run a routine security check on my computer. I felt my face get hot. She plugged something into my USB port and started clicking around while I sat there trying to look calm. After a minute, she mentioned there'd been weird activity on the network lately. Her eyes stayed on her screen, but I could tell she was watching my reaction. She asked if I'd noticed anything strange. I forced myself to breathe normal and said no. Everything seemed fine to me. She nodded slowly and kept typing. Finally, she unplugged her thing and said everything looked good on my end. She walked away, and I realized I'd been holding my breath. During my lunch break, I went to a coffee shop 2 blocks away. I ordered something I didn't want and sat in the back corner with my phone. I searched for Leilani Khoury and found her obituary right away. It was from 2 years ago. 2 years. It said she was a former corporate recruiter who died of natural causes. There was a photo of her, and it was definitely the same woman from the pier. Everything about that night was fake. The whole thing was set up to make me think I was making some huge choice between life and death. But she'd been dead for 2 years, which meant someone else was playing her part. An actress, probably. I felt dizzy sitting there. My phone buzzed with a new email. Another encrypted address. This one had a video file attached. I looked around the coffee shop to make sure nobody was watching my screen. Then I opened it. The video was dark and grainy, like it came from a security camera. It showed the CEO standing in what looked like a parking garage. The 2 men from the docks walked up to her. I recognized them right away. They talked for maybe 30 seconds. The CEO was clearly giving them instructions. I couldn't hear anything, but I watched her mouth move. I played it again and focused on her lips. Make sure she throws it in the water. That's what she was saying. Make sure she throws it in the water. The video kept going and showed them nodding and walking away. She wanted me to destroy the case. The whole chase at the docks was planned. Those men worked for her. They were supposed to scare me into throwing it in the water. But somehow that did the opposite of what she wanted. I sat there staring at my phone screen for 10 minutes. That evening, Ria called again. I was back in my apartment making dinner I wouldn't eat. She asked if I was okay, and I said not really. She started explaining more technical stuff. The thumb drive had waterproof covering with a wireless sender inside. When it hit the water, it turned on and sent out the entire hacker list to a bunch of receivers the hackers had put around the harbor months before. They'd been planning this for a long time, waiting for the right moment. I realized something while she talked. I was never supposed to deliver anything to Leilani. She wasn't even real, or at least the woman I met wasn't really her. The whole mission was about getting me to destroy the drive in that specific spot where the hackers could grab the data when it transmitted. The CEO thought she was destroying the list. Instead, she was handing it right to them. Ria said the hackers wanted to meet me, to say thank you in person. They wanted to offer protection too. I told her I was scared of getting more involved in this. She insisted they weren't criminals, just people who were trying to show everyone the truth about corruption before the CEO turned on them. Now they were free and they wanted to help keep me safe. I said I needed time to think about it. She said okay, but not to wait too long. Things were going to get complicated soon. She didn't say anything at first, just stood there looking at me with those cold eyes that made my hands go clammy. I closed the laptop fast, maybe too fast, and tried to smile like nothing weird had just happened. She walked away without a word, her heels clicking on the floor until she disappeared into her office. I sat frozen at my desk for what felt like forever, staring at the closed laptop lid and wondering if she'd seen the message. My phone buzzed in my pocket, but I was too scared to check it. The office felt different now. Like every person walking past could be watching me, reporting back to her. I packed up my stuff early and left without saying goodbye to anyone. The next morning, I showed up to work 30 minutes late because I'd barely slept. My hands shook as I swiped my badge at the entrance. The CEO was already in her office when I got to my desk. Her assistant walked over 5 minutes later and told me she wanted to see me. Now. I grabbed a notepad like I might need to take notes and walked to her door. She was sitting behind her massive desk with her hands folded, staring at me as I came in. She told me to close the door and sit down. I did. She asked me to walk her through what happened at the pier again. Every single detail, starting from when I arrived. I stuck to my story, describing the headlights following me and how scared I got when those 2 men stepped out of their car. I told her I ran and they chased me and I panicked when they got close, so I threw the case in the water before they could grab it. She watched my face the whole time I talked, not blinking, not moving. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair and asked if I was certain the case went into the water. I said yes, absolutely certain. I watched it sink. She studied me for another long moment that made sweat gather at the back of my neck. Then she leaned forward and told me the entire situation was confidential, that I was never to speak about it to anyone. Not coworkers, not friends, not family. She said if I violated that confidentiality, there would be serious legal consequences, possibly criminal charges. I nodded and said I understood. She dismissed me with a wave of her hand. I walked out of her office feeling like I might throw up. Camilla from IT was standing in the hallway near the water cooler, and when she saw me, she walked over fast. She kept her voice low and asked if I had a minute to talk somewhere private. I looked around to make sure nobody was listening and said okay. She led me to an empty conference room on the third floor and closed the door. She pulled out her laptop and opened it, showing me logs of data being deleted from the company servers. Huge amounts of files, she said, all being scrubbed systematically over the past 3 days. She'd been monitoring it because it seemed weird, like someone was covering something up. She looked at me directly and asked if I knew anything about what was going on. I felt trapped between staying silent and trusting her. My brain was screaming to keep my mouth shut, but something about the genuine worry in her face made me take a chance. I told her I might have information, but I needed to be absolutely sure she wasn't going to report back to the CEO. She seemed surprised by that and asked why I would think she'd do that. Camilla took me to a quiet corner of the conference room away from the door. She pulled out her phone and showed me encrypted messages, dozens of them, all documenting suspicious activities she'd noticed over the past few months. Money transfers that didn't match any legitimate business expenses, server access at strange hours, files being moved and renamed to hide them. She said she'd been waiting for someone else to notice something was wrong before she made any moves because going after the CEO alone seemed too dangerous. I stared at the messages on her phone and made a decision. I told her everything. The delivery mission, the peer, the woman who wasn't really Leilani Khoury, the men chasing me, throwing the case in the water, the message on my laptop. She listened without interrupting, her eyes getting wider as I went on. When I finished, she sat back and said she believed me. I pulled out my phone and showed her the video Ria had sent me, the one showing the CEO meeting with the 2 men in the parking garage. Camilla watched it twice, her face going pale. She said this was bigger than she'd thought. We spent the next hour comparing everything we knew. Camilla explained that the company's legitimate consulting business was basically just a cover. The real money came from selling corporate espionage services to whoever would pay. She'd found evidence of contracts with foreign companies and even some government entities. The hackers, she said, were originally hired to steal competitor secrets and gather intelligence on rival businesses. But somewhere along the way, they'd started developing ethics, questioning the jobs they were being asked to do. That's when they became a liability. The CEO couldn't risk them exposing what the company really did, so she decided to eliminate the entire operation and destroy the list of their identities. I showed Camilla more of the encrypted emails Ria had sent me, and she cross-referenced them with her own server logs. Everything matched up. The timeline, the file deletions, the money movements. We were looking at proof of massive fraud and illegal espionage operations. That night, Ria called and said she'd arranged a meeting. She wanted me to meet one of the hackers from the original list, someone who could explain what really happened when I threw that case in the water. I asked if I could bring Camilla, and Ria said yes. The more people who knew the truth, the better. She gave me an address for a small restaurant across town, the kind of place that didn't have security cameras. I picked up Camilla at her apartment and we drove there together, both of us nervous and checking the mirrors constantly to see if anyone was following. The restaurant was nearly empty when we arrived. Ria was sitting at a back table with a guy who looked nothing like what I'd imagined. I'd been picturing some dangerous criminal type, but this was just a normal-looking man in his 30s wearing jeans and a button-up shirt. Ria introduced him as Tanner. We sat down, and he thanked me for coming. Tanner explained he used to work in cybersecurity for a major tech company before the CEO recruited him. She'd made it sound noble, he said, like they'd be taking down corrupt corporations and exposing fraud. He showed us his phone with files and documents proving what they'd actually uncovered. Bank fraud, bribery, blackmail, insider trading. The CEO's company wasn't exposing corruption. It was facilitating it and profiting from it. When Tanner and the other hackers started questioning the jobs they were being assigned, when they realized they were helping criminals instead of stopping them, the CEO decided to shut everything down. She wanted to destroy the list and make sure none of them could ever connect her to what they'd done. Tanner pulled up more files showing communications between the CEO and various clients, including some very powerful people who would not want this information public. He told us there were 12 hackers total on the original list. All of them had been recruited the same way he was, with promises of doing something meaningful. By the time they realized the truth, they were already deep enough that the CEO could threaten them with criminal charges if they tried to walk away. So they'd been planning their own escape for months, setting up the emergency protocol. They'd planted wireless receivers around the harbor and put a transmitter inside that thumb drive. The drive was waterproof and designed to activate when it hit the water. When I threw it in, it triggered the whole system. The list got transmitted to all 12 hackers simultaneously, along with copies of all the evidence they'd gathered. Everyone went into hiding immediately with full documentation of everything the CEO had done. I sat there trying to process what he was saying. I'd thought I was destroying the list, but instead I'd set them all free. Tanner pulled up another file on his phone showing messages between all 12 hackers. They'd been planning their exit strategy for months, he explained, setting up new identities and safe locations in different cities. None of them wanted revenge or confrontation. They just wanted to vanish and start over without looking over their shoulders constantly. But they'd kept copies of everything they'd uncovered during their work for the CEO, detailed records of fraud and illegal deals and worse things. If we wanted to expose her through proper legal channels instead of just letting her keep operating, they'd hand over all their evidence. Camilla and I looked at each other across the table. The weight of what Tanner was offering hit me hard. We weren't just talking about getting someone fired or causing a company scandal. This was information that could destroy the entire business and send the CEO to prison for years. People would lose their jobs. Lawsuits would happen. The news would cover it for months. And the CEO had already proven she was willing to chase people with guns and stage elaborate scenarios to protect her secrets. If she found out we had this evidence and were planning to use it, what would she do to us? My hands felt cold despite the warm restaurant. Camilla reached over and squeezed my arm once, and I could see she was thinking the same things I was. Tanner said he understood if we needed time to decide, but the offer wouldn't last forever. The hackers wanted to disappear soon, and once they did, the evidence would disappear with them. Rhea added that she'd been trying to take down the CEO for 3 years since being forced out of the company, and this was the first real chance that had appeared. We left the restaurant an hour later with Tanner's contact information and an encrypted thumb drive containing sample files. He said to look through them and see if we thought we could actually do something with the evidence. The drive felt like it weighed 10 pounds in my jacket pocket during the whole drive back. The next morning, I walked into the office at my usual time and sat down at my desk like nothing had changed. The CEO was in early meetings on the executive floor. I opened my laptop and started working on the scheduling tasks I'd been assigned, but my mind kept drifting to that thumb drive hidden in my apartment. Camilla sent me a message through the company chat asking if I wanted coffee, which was our code for meeting in the parking garage where we could talk without being overheard. I grabbed my keys and headed down. She was already there, leaning against her car and looking tired. She'd stayed up late reviewing the sample files Tanner gave us, and her face was pale. The evidence was worse than she'd expected. Bank accounts in offshore locations, payments to people for services that were clearly illegal, communications about silencing former employees who knew too much. If we went forward with exposing this, there would be no going back. We agreed we needed to be extremely careful about who we approached and how we did it. The CEO had connections throughout the city's business community, friends in government offices, lawyers on retainer. One wrong move and she'd know we were coming for her. We decided to keep meeting with Tanner over the next few days to organize everything properly before making any decisions. Camilla would handle the technical evidence from the company servers. I would document everything I knew about the delivery mission and what happened at the pier. Together, we'd build a complete picture that couldn't be ignored or explained away. For the next 3 days, I sat at my desk during work hours doing my normal secretary tasks while my brain screamed about the evidence we were gathering. I smiled at coworkers in the hallway. I answered phones and scheduled meetings and filed paperwork. At lunch, I'd meet Camilla in her car or at a coffee shop 3 blocks away, and we'd go over new files Tanner had sent us. The hackers had documented everything during their time working for the CEO. Every job they'd been assigned, every target they'd investigated, every piece of dirt they'd uncovered. Some of it was about competitors and business rivals, but a lot of it was about the CEO's own activities. Money laundering through shell companies, bribes paid to city officials, blackmail material gathered on people who might cause problems. At night, I'd go home and add my own notes to our growing file, writing down every detail I could remember about that night at the pier and the days that followed. The more we gathered, the more terrified I became. This wasn't just corporate fraud. This was organized crime operating behind a legitimate business front. On Thursday morning, a man in a dark suit showed up at the office asking to speak with the CEO. The receptionist called up to the executive floor, and I heard her say it was Detective Cabrera investigating the missing boat incident from Pier 8. My stomach dropped. I kept my head down and pretended to work on my computer while I strained to hear what was happening. 20 minutes later, the CEO came down to the lobby with the detective. She looked calm and professional, her usual controlled expression in place, but I noticed her shoulders were tight under her jacket. She walked him through the lobby, and I caught pieces of their conversation as they passed my desk. She was expressing concern about the incident, offering full cooperation with the investigation, asking if there was anything the company could do to help. Her voice was smooth and sympathetic. The detective thanked her and said he was just following up on some details, nothing to worry about. But I could see the tension in the way she held herself, the slight stiffness in her movements. She knew something was wrong even if she didn't know exactly what yet. After the detective left, the CEO stood by the front windows for a few minutes looking out at the street. Then she turned and walked back to the elevators without looking at anyone. An hour later, an email went out to all staff announcing a mandatory meeting in the main conference room at 2 o'clock. I felt sick. When 2 o'clock came, Everyone filed into the conference room and found seats. The CEO stood at the front looking serious and professional. She announced new security protocols effective immediately. All company devices would now be monitored for unusual activity. Access to certain floors would require additional clearance. Visitors would need to sign in and be escorted at all times. She explained these changes were necessary to protect company assets and maintain client confidentiality in an increasingly complex business environment. Her eyes swept the room as she spoke, and I forced myself to keep my face neutral when her gaze passed over me. She was tightening control because she sensed something was off. Maybe the detective's visit had spooked her. Maybe she'd noticed other signs that her secrets were at risk. Either way, she was circling the wagons and making it harder for anyone to move against her. The next day, Axel found me in the break room during my afternoon coffee break. He poured himself a cup and stood next to me, speaking quietly even though we were alone. He said he'd noticed the CEO acting strange lately, more paranoid than usual, watching people more carefully. He asked if I knew what was going on because I'd been acting weird too, distracted and nervous. I wanted to brush him off like I had before, but something in his expression made me pause. He wasn't asking out of idle curiosity. He looked genuinely concerned and maybe a little scared himself. I took a risk and asked him if he could keep something completely confidential. He nodded immediately. I told him I couldn't explain everything right then, but some people were looking into serious problems at the company, and things might get complicated soon. His eyes widened slightly, but he didn't look surprised. He said he'd suspected something was wrong for a while now. That evening, Camilla and I met with Axel at a diner across town. We'd decided to bring him into our small circle after talking it through, because having someone in accounting might be useful. Axel sat across from us in the booth and listened while we explained what we'd discovered. When we finished, he was quiet for a long moment. Then he pulled out his own phone and showed us a spreadsheet he'd been keeping privately for the past 6 months. Financial irregularities in the company accounts, payments that didn't match up with services received, money moving through accounts in ways that didn't make sense for legitimate business operations. He'd been documenting everything because he suspected fraud, but he hadn't known how deep it went, or who to trust with the information. Now we had 3 different sets of evidence that all pointed to the same conclusion. The hacker's records of illegal jobs and communications, Camilla's IT logs showing data manipulation and security breaches, Axel's accounting documents proving financial crimes. Together, it created a complete picture of the CEO's criminal activities that would be almost impossible to deny or explain away. We spent the next 2 hours talking through our options. We could try to expose everything ourselves by going to the media, but that was risky and might give the CEO time to destroy evidence or disappear. We could approach the FBI directly, but we didn't know if she had connections there too. The safest option seemed to be going through Detective Cabrera, since he was already investigating the pier incident and might be willing to look deeper. But we had to be strategic about timing. If we moved too soon before organizing everything properly, the CEO might figure out what we were doing and shut us down. If we waited too long, she might destroy evidence or hurt someone to protect herself. Camilla suggested we get everything fully documented first, then approach the detective with such overwhelming proof that he'd have no choice but to act immediately. Axel agreed, but said we needed to be ready to move fast once we made contact, because the CEO would know something was happening as soon as the detective started asking new questions. 2 days later, Tanner sent us a new batch of files that made everything else look minor by comparison. Encrypted communications between the CEO and various clients, including messages about former employees who'd become problems. The conversations were carefully worded, but the meaning was clear. She was discussing ways to silence people who knew too much about her operations. In one message chain, she talked about permanent solutions for someone who was threatening to go to the authorities. The dates matched up with a former company manager who died in a car accident 8 months ago. The accident had been ruled as brake failure, but now we had messages from 2 weeks before discussing how to handle him. My hands shook as I read through the files on my laptop at home that night. This wasn't just fraud and money laundering anymore. This was potentially murder. Tanner included a note saying they'd verified the communications were authentic and had expert analysis proving they hadn't been altered or faked. But we needed to make sure everything would hold up in court before moving forward, because the CEO's lawyers would attack every piece of evidence looking for any weakness to exploit. Ria called me the next morning before I left for work. She said she'd found a lawyer who specialized in corporate whistleblower cases and had experience taking on powerful defendants. The lawyer's name was Sarah Sampson, and she'd agreed to review our evidence confidentially to assess whether we had a strong enough case. Ria gave me an address for Sampson's office and said she could meet with us that afternoon if we were available. I called Camilla and Axel, and we all took extended lunch breaks to drive across town together. Sampson's office was in an older building near the courthouse, and her waiting room was small but professional. She met with us in a conference room and spent 3 hours going through everything we'd brought: the hacker evidence, the financial records, the IT logs, the encrypted communications. She asked detailed questions about how each piece had been obtained and whether we could verify its authenticity. When she finally sat back in her chair, she looked impressed and concerned at the same time. She said we had enough documentation for both criminal charges and civil suits. The evidence was solid and well organized. But she warned us that going after someone with the CEO's resources and connections would be dangerous and would take a long time. We'd need protection, legal immunity agreements for our cooperation, and possibly new identities if things got bad. The CEO would fight back hard, and she had the money to drag things out in court for years. Samson asked if we were absolutely sure we wanted to move forward, because once we started this process, there would be no turning back. We looked at each other around the conference table. Camilla nodded first, then Axel, then me. We told Samson we were sure. Samson leaned back in her chair and looked at each of us carefully. She said going after someone with the CEO's resources and connections would be dangerous and would take a long time. We'd need protection agreements set up, legal immunity for our cooperation, and probably new identities if things got really bad. The CEO had money to drag this out in court for years, and connections to make our lives difficult while it happened. Samson pulled out some papers and started explaining witness protection programs and relocation options. My stomach felt tight listening to her describe leaving everything behind, changing my name, moving to a different state. Camilla asked about timeline, and Samson said we were looking at months of investigation before any arrests, then potentially years of trials and appeals. Axel wanted to know about our jobs, and Samson said the company would likely fold once charges were filed, so we'd all be unemployed anyway. She laid out the whole process step by step, and it sounded exhausting and scary. But she also said the evidence we had was strong enough to win if we stuck with it. We signed some initial paperwork that afternoon, agreements about confidentiality and cooperation. Samson said she'd start filing the necessary motions and setting up meetings with prosecutors. When we finally left her office, it was getting dark outside. I couldn't sleep that night. I lay in bed staring at my ceiling, thinking about how my simple job as a secretary led to uncovering this massive criminal operation. Part of me wanted to walk away and pretend I never saw anything. I could quit my job, move to a different city, just disappear and let someone else deal with it. That would be so much easier than what Samson described. But I knew that wasn't really an option anymore. The CEO already suspected something was wrong, and walking away wouldn't make me safe. Plus, all those people the company hurt over the years deserve justice. The hackers who got threatened and hunted deserve to be free. I kept thinking about Leilani and whether she was even real or just an actress playing a part. Either way, someone had gone to a lot of trouble to make me think I caused her death. That kind of manipulation made me angry. I rolled over and checked my phone for the 100th time, half expecting another encrypted message. Nothing came. Around 3 a.m, I finally fell asleep. The next morning, I walked into the office trying to act normal. My hands shook a little as I made coffee in the break room. The CEO's assistant came by my desk around 10 and said she wanted to see me. My heart started beating faster as I walked down the hallway to her office. When I stepped inside, she was standing by the window looking out at the city. She turned around, and this time her mask slipped slightly. Her smile didn't look friendly anymore. She asked if I'd been contacted by anyone strange lately. Her hand rested near her phone on the desk like she was ready to make a call. Her eyes watched my face carefully, looking for any sign I was lying. I could feel sweat on my palms. The office felt smaller than usual, like the walls were closer. She waited for my answer, not breaking eye contact. I forced myself to stay calm and maintain my innocent secretary act. I said no, just the police asking routine questions about what happened at the pier. I added that they seemed satisfied with my statement and hadn't contacted me since. She studied me for a long, uncomfortable moment. Her fingers tapped once on the desk. Then she nodded slowly and told me I could go. But I felt her eyes following me all the way back to my desk. My legs felt weak walking down that hallway. When I sat down, I noticed my computer screen was at a slightly different angle than I'd left it. Someone had been at my desk while I was in her office. I opened my laptop carefully, half expecting to find something deleted or changed. Everything looked normal, but I didn't trust it. 20 minutes later, Camilla sent me an urgent message through our encrypted app. She said the CEO just tried to access her computer remotely, and she barely blocked it in time. The attempt came from the CEO's office IP address. Camilla had set up alerts after our meeting with Samson and caught it immediately. She said we were running out of time before the CEO figured out we were working against her. The remote access attempt meant she was actively hunting for evidence of what we knew. I messaged back asking what we should do. Camilla said we needed to move faster than planned. She'd already called Samson and Detective Cabrera. We had to bring everything to the police today, not wait any longer. We scheduled an emergency meeting with Detective Cabrera for that evening at a police station across town. I told my boss I had a dentist appointment and left work early. Camilla and Axel did the same. We met Samson in the parking lot and went inside together carrying boxes of printed documents and USB drives with digital files. Detective Cabrera set us up in a conference room and we spent 3 hours walking him through everything we'd discovered. Samson presented the evidence systematically, starting with the financial records showing money laundering patterns, then the IT logs proving the CEO had deleted files and tracked employees, then the encrypted communications we'd recovered. Tanner joined us by video call to verify the hacker list and explain how the recruitment program worked. We showed Detective Cabrera the video of the CEO meeting with the 2 men who chased me at the docks. We walked him through the staged peer encounter and how it was designed to force me into destroying the drive in a specific location. Detective Cabrera was initially skeptical, asking a lot of questions about how we'd obtained certain information and whether it could be verified. But as he reviewed the financial records and saw the encrypted communications with his own eyes, his expression grew serious. He spent a long time reading through the messages about permanent solutions for people who knew too much. When he saw the dates matched up with that manager's car accident, he got very quiet. He asked Tanner detailed questions about the hacker operations and what they'd found. After 2 hours, he said this was much bigger than his missing boat case and needed to involve federal authorities. He made some calls right there in the conference room. Within an hour, 2 FBI agents arrived and we started the whole presentation over again for them. Within 2 days, FBI agents arrived at the company unannounced. I was at my desk when they walked in, a whole team of them in suits carrying badges. They went straight to the CEO's office first. Then they spread throughout the building. Some went to the IT department. Others headed for the basement with the hidden office. They started seizing computers and boxing up files. The CEO came out of her office trying to maintain her composure, talking calmly with the lead agent. But I saw panic flash across her face when agents started removing servers from the hidden basement office. She kept her professional mask on, saying she'd cooperate fully and asking what this was about. The lead agent handed her some paperwork. Her face went pale as she read it. Employees gathered in clusters, whispering and watching. Nobody knew what was happening. The agents worked for hours, removing equipment and documents. They interviewed various employees, including the IT department head. Around 4 in the afternoon, they asked me to come with them for questioning. I spent hours at the FBI field office being questioned by federal agents. They had me walk them through the delivery mission from start to finish, every detail. What the CEO said, what the case looked like, the drive to the pier, the men chasing me, meeting Leilani, throwing the case in the water. They recorded everything and had me repeat parts multiple times. They were particularly interested in the staged pier encounter and how the CEO manipulated me into triggering the data release. They asked about the message on my laptop, and when I first realized something was wrong, they wanted to know about every conversation I'd had with the CEO since that night. I told them about her questions this morning and how her hand was near her phone like a threat. They asked about Camilla and Axel and our investigation. I explained how we'd found the evidence and connected with Tanner. The questioning went on for so long I lost track of time. When they finally finished, it was after midnight. The CEO was arrested at her home that evening on charges of money laundering, corporate espionage, fraud, and conspiracy. The news spread through the office instantly the next morning. People crowded around computers reading articles and watching video of her being let out in handcuffs. Everyone was shocked because she seemed so professional and legitimate. Nobody suspected she was running criminal operations through the company. Coworkers kept asking me if I knew anything since I worked close to her. I just said I was as surprised as everyone else. The building felt strange that day, like nobody knew what to do without her there. Managers held emergency meetings. HR sent out emails about cooperating with investigators. Federal agents came back and interviewed more employees. The whole company was falling apart. By afternoon, rumors started that we'd all be laid off soon. People packed up their desks just in case. I sat at my workspace watching everything fall apart around me, knowing I'd helped make it happen, feeling scared and relieved at the same time. That evening, federal agents drove Camilla, Axel, and me to a hotel on the edge of the city. They called it temporary protection, but it felt more like hiding. 2 agents stayed in the hallway outside our rooms at all times. Another one checked every window and door twice before leaving us alone. The hotel was nice, the kind with thick carpets and room service menus, but I couldn't shake the feeling that my former boss was somehow watching. The idea that I needed protection from a corporate CEO seemed crazy. She wore designer suits and held board meetings, but the agents treated it seriously, checking in every few hours and running background checks on anyone who came near the building. Camilla paced her room most of the first night. I could hear her footsteps through the wall. Axel knocked on my door around midnight with coffee from the lobby. We sat in my room not saying much, just existing in the weird space between normal life and whatever this was. The next morning, agents brought Tanner to meet with us in a conference room downstairs. He looked tired but relieved. The prosecutor had offered him and the other hackers immunity deals in exchange for testimony. Most of them agreed within hours. Tanner explained that they'd been living in fear for years, moving apartments, using fake names, always looking over their shoulders. The immunity meant they could finally stop running. He showed me messages from the others, short notes of thanks mixed with disbelief that it was really over. One hacker had been hiding in another country for 2 years. Another had changed her identity completely and cut off contact with her family. The relief in Tanner's voice was real. He kept saying he could barely believe it. Over the next week, news reports started revealing more about the company. Reporters found connections to organized crime groups in 3 states. Federal investigators discovered links to foreign intelligence services. What started as corporate corruption kept growing into something much bigger. I watched the news in my hotel room, seeing my former workplace described as a criminal front operation. Coworkers I'd eaten lunch with were being interviewed by FBI agents. The IT department head was arrested for helping destroy evidence. Every day brought new revelations that made the whole thing feel more unreal. The prosecutor assigned to the case visited us on day 5. She was a woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and a stack of folders. She sat across from us in the hotel conference room and laid out what would happen next. Multiple trials, she explained. Federal charges, state charges, possibly international cooperation with other governments. The legal process could take years. She needed us as witnesses for at least 4 separate cases. But she seemed confident. The evidence was overwhelming, she said. The CEO's encrypted communications, the financial records Axel had documented, Camilla's IT logs, the hacker testimony, everything lined up. The prosecutor smiled slightly when she talked about the strength of the case. Still, years of trials meant years of being connected to this mess. I sat in my hotel room that night thinking about all the employees who would lose their jobs. The company was dissolved, assets seized, operations shut down. People who had nothing to do with the CEO's crimes would be unemployed. Single parents, recent graduates, people with mortgages and car payments. The guilt sat heavy in my chest. The lawyer came by the next day and found me staring out the window. I told her about the guilt. She sat down and reminded me that those employees were victims too. The CEO's crimes were hurting everyone, creating a toxic workplace built on illegal activity. Exposing her protected future targets, other companies, other employees who might have been pulled into the criminal network. The lawyer's voice was gentle but firm. She'd worked whistleblower cases for 15 years. She'd seen what happened when people stayed silent out of misplaced loyalty. The damage always spread. Ria visited on day 8. The agents cleared her after running a background check. She sat with me in the hotel restaurant and we ordered coffee neither of us really wanted. She thanked me for following through, for not backing down when things got dangerous. Then she explained something I hadn't known. She'd been trying to take down the CEO for 3 years, ever since being forced out of the company after discovering some of the illegal activities. She'd gathered evidence, contacted authorities, tried everything. But the CEO had too many connections, too many people protecting her. My accidental involvement, throwing that case in the water and triggering the data release, finally made it possible. The hackers coming forward, the evidence becoming public, everything breaking open at once. Ria's eyes were wet when she talked about it. She'd almost given up. 3 weeks after the arrest, agents told me I could return to my apartment. They'd be monitoring the building with security cameras, and I had a direct number to call if anything seemed wrong. The company had been dissolved completely, but I received a settlement payment as part of the whistleblower protection agreement. 6 months of living expenses, enough to figure out what came next. Walking back into my apartment felt strange. Everything was exactly where I'd left it, but I felt different. The coffee mug still sat in the sink. My jacket hung on the back of the chair. Normal life waiting for me like nothing had happened. Detective Cabrera stopped by 2 days later. He'd been working with the federal team, helping coordinate evidence from the pier incident with the larger investigation. He sat in my living room and told me the CEO's lawyers were trying to negotiate a plea deal, but the evidence was too strong. She was looking at serious prison time, and her powerful connections were abandoning her now that everything was public. Former business partners were giving interviews claiming they never trusted her. Board members were cooperating with investigators. Detective Cabrera said it happened that way sometimes. People who seemed untouchable suddenly found themselves completely alone. I started therapy the following week. My therapist was a calm woman with gray hair who specialized in trauma. I told her about the fear, the paranoia of thinking I was watched, the weight of knowing I'd exposed massive corruption. She listened without judgment and helped me understand that I'd made the right choices even when I was scared and uncertain. The therapy sessions became a place where I could process everything without worrying about legal implications or protecting information, just talking through what happened and how it affected me. Axel and I stayed in touch through text messages. He found a new accounting job at a legitimate firm within 2 weeks. When we met for coffee, he joked that after our adventure, normal corporate work felt boring. But he was glad to be somewhere with actual ethics, where the biggest drama was arguing over expense reports. He looked lighter somehow, like a weight had lifted. We promised to keep meeting up, 2 people who'd accidentally stumbled into something much bigger than themselves and somehow made it through. Camilla called me 2 weeks later with news that a cybersecurity firm had reached out to her directly. They'd been following the case in the news and wanted someone who'd proven they could stand up to corruption from the inside. She sounded excited when she told me about the offer, talking fast about the projects they had lined up and the team she'd be joining. We met for coffee before her first day, and she made me promise we'd stay connected no matter where our paths took us. I agreed easily because after everything we'd been through together, losing touch wasn't an option. The next morning, I found a message waiting in my encrypted email from Tanner. He thanked me again for what I'd done at the pier, even though I still wasn't sure I deserved the credit. He explained that he and the other hackers from the list had decided to start a legitimate security consulting business together. They wanted to use their skills to help companies prevent the kind of corruption we'd exposed instead of just exposing it after the fact. He included a link to their new website, and I spent 20 minutes reading through their mission statement and services. It felt good knowing something positive was coming out of all the chaos. 3 days after that, the prosecutor called me into her office downtown. She sat across from me at a conference table covered in legal documents and explained that the CEO's trial date had been set for 8 months out. I was confirmed as a key witness, which meant I'd need to testify about the delivery mission, the peer encounter, and everything that followed. She assured me I'd have protection and support throughout the entire process, and she seemed confident about getting justice. Her certainty helped calm some of my nerves about facing the CEO in court. I started job hunting the following week because my settlement money wouldn't last forever. Most positions felt wrong after everything I'd experienced, too corporate or too disconnected from what mattered. Then I found a listing for an administrative coordinator at a nonprofit organization that advocated for corporate transparency and whistleblower protection. The job description could have been written about my own experience. I applied immediately and got called in for an interview 3 days later. The director who interviewed me had kind eyes and asked thoughtful questions about why I wanted to work there. I told her the truth about what I'd been through, and she nodded like she understood completely. They offered me the position that same afternoon. 4 months passed faster than I expected. I settled into my new routine at the nonprofit, helping coordinate events and manage communications for whistleblowers who needed support. My apartment felt like home again instead of a place I was hiding. I was more careful now, checking over my shoulder and staying aware of my surroundings in ways I never had before. But I was also stronger somehow, more confident in my ability to handle difficult situations when they arose. The fear hadn't disappeared completely, but it didn't control me anymore. Ria became more than just someone who'd helped expose the CEO. She turned into a real friend and mentor, someone I could call when the legal process felt overwhelming, or when I needed advice about moving forward. She introduced me to other whistleblowers who'd been through similar experiences, and their support network became invaluable. We met once a month at a quiet restaurant where we could talk freely about our cases and the challenges of life after exposing corruption. Hearing their stories reminded me I wasn't alone in what I'd faced. One Tuesday morning, the FBI agent who'd been leading the case showed up at my nonprofit office. My stomach dropped when I saw him walking through the door, worried something had gone wrong, but he smiled and asked if we could talk privately. In the small conference room, he told me they'd uncovered evidence linking the CEO to 6 other criminal enterprises across different industries. Multiple agencies were now building cases based on what we'd started. My decision to come forward had triggered a chain reaction that was exposing corruption in places I'd never imagined. He thanked me for my courage and said more people would be coming forward because of what I'd done. I stood in my new office later that week, looking out at the city through windows that felt nothing like the glass building where this all started. The skyline looked different from here, less intimidating somehow. I thought about how a simple delivery mission had changed my entire life in ways I never could have predicted. Part of me still couldn't believe I'd thrown that case in the water, making a split-second choice that set everything in motion. But I was proud of that choice now, even though I hadn't understood what it meant at the time. The CEO's trial was still months away, and I knew testifying would be hard. But I was ready to face her in court and help make sure she faced full consequences for everything she'd done. The hackers were free, the corruption was exposed, and I had a purpose that felt meaningful. Whatever happened next, I knew I could handle it.